We have more launch news here at Cycling Weekly. This time, Cervélo has updated its S series. That's its aerodynamic range. In this video, I'm going to show you what I got up to at the launch, talk you through the new bike, which is quite a lot different than the old S5, and give you my first ride impressions. So I've arrived. I'm about a 30-minute drive outside of Girona in the beautiful hills and countryside that surround the city, and I am here for another bike launch. This time I'm visiting Cervélo, who are updating their S series. So we're going to see some brand new aero bikes, which is really exciting, and the summer of new aero bikes continues. Today we are riding 60 kilometers on the new S5 around the surrounding hills and countryside. A good test apparently, lots of flowing roads, undulations to check out the new bike on. So the new Cervélo S5 is disc brake only, like a lot of aero bikes we've been seeing this summer. It is disc only, rim brakes are gone, kaput. It is still mechanical, although I'm riding a Di2 version, so you can get both. And Cervélo say that getting rid of the rim brake was really important in this bike's design. And it was something that they fought tooth and nail to do since about 2014. Because by removing the caliper, you can make a frame much more efficient. Thanks to the new disc brakes, the frame can also accommodate wider tyres, now fitting 28mm ones, no problem. And this is due to a couple of frame tweaks. This was a priority for Cervélo, who wanted to make a bike that could be ridden comfortably over cobbles and rough ground, while still giving an aerodynamic advantage. So let's get to the standout features of this bike, starting with that V-shaped stem. It's kind of the elephant in the room. It looks like the Starship Enterprise. It's weird, but it's not without purpose. Firstly, it's more aerodynamic. By putting a hole in the stem, the wind can pass through it more cleanly instead of just hitting it and being disrupted. Now, this might sound strange, but actually, when you think about it, it sort of makes sense. Now, crucially, Cervélo found that if the wind can pass through the stem cleanly, it then reattaches to the top tube faster, which causes less drag. And now, there's a third part to this. If it reattaches to the top tube faster, it then passes around the rider's legs quicker and more smoothly, again, without disrupting the airflow. The stem also makes cable routing easier. The cables can run from the brakes and the shifters into each arm of the stem and then down into the head tube. It's important to note that for this to work, Cervélo had to get rid of the fork steerer. Instead, they're using a tensioning rod, which has freed up space in that area to run the cables more cleanly. You have to remember that this is a bike designed for Mark Cavendish. In fact, Cav had input with this bike, and his sprinting style is a lot different to others, and it really rocked the fork steerer back and forth. So they got rid of it, put in a tensioning rod. And that holds all the bearings in place and packs everything down, whilst then the front end can be stiffened and it improves the handling of the bike. When you're riding it, it doesn't look that strange at all, and you get used to the fact that your stem has a massive hole in it pretty quickly. Although it doesn't look it, the bar and the stem are actually a two-piece setup and not one unit. That means the bar can be raised separately to the stem using 2.5mm spacers, and the stem itself can be raised using 5mm spacers. It's a pretty neat system in which it's kind of quite modular. You can change bits of it to get your perfect position. It's quite an interesting take on bike setup, really. On the launch, I rode the new Cervélo S5 with no spacers under the stem, so the stack was as low as it could go. And I did that for maybe 150 kilometers, so 60 kilometers on the first day, 90 kilometers on the second day. And it wasn't until the end of the second ride that Cervélo said to me,
Oh, a slammed new S5 is the equivalent of a slammed old S5, but with a -6-degree stem, which is really aggressive. And even though it might not look it, this is truly a performance-orientated bike. That leads nicely on to the next thing I want to discuss about the bike, which is the handling, and that it's really good. Out on the road, it feels like they've taken the descending prowess of the Cervélo R5 and put it into this new Cervélo S5. It really feels like they share the same DNA. Dropping into corners, it feels exactly the same. The S5 is so accurate to the line that you put it on. We were descending at 65 or 70 kilometers an hour into big turns, and the Cervélo S5 just felt completely safe and completely stable and left you feeling completely in control. And actually, an analogy I would use is like when you're sitting in a really plush car and you kind of can't really feel how fast you're going. This is what the S5 feels like when descending. Cervélo also lowered the bottom bracket a little bit, and it makes cornering much more enjoyable. It also said it did this because of the difference wider tyres can make to bottom bracket height, which is something I hadn't considered before.
And torsional stiffness is up by 13%. And this was directly off the feedback from the pros like Cav at Dimension Data. But Cervélo wanted to be careful that they didn't do it too much because that can affect the ride quality quite dramatically. You don't feel too stiff. You know, the front end isn't so stiff that it's twitchy. It's very assured. There's no sore hands, sore feet.
As a whole, the new bike is 5.5 watts faster than the old Cervélo S5. Now, we've spoken at length about the new front end and the new stem and how aerodynamic that has made the bike. But Cervélo also made savings elsewhere. For example, it changed the height of the dropped stays a little bit and redesigned the seat tube, which helped make aerodynamic savings. And it also changed the shape of the seat stays where they meet the chain stays. You can notice on pictures that they curve a little bit, and that is also faster according to the brand. So talking to the Cervélo engineers on the launch, it really feels like creating an aero bike is now about creating a whole system. And this is something we've seen other bike brands doing this summer as well. Whereas once having an aero bike was about having a bike that was purely about speed, how fast can it be and how aerodynamic it can be. Now consumers want so much more, especially considering that actually there's not that much more that bike brands can do to make bikes aerodynamically fast, especially with the current UCI limits.
And I think the real test with an aero bike especially one with a stem as wacky as the Cervélo S5, is what is it like to live with? And that'll be the big test. I think getting one of these in and doing a long-term test and like swapping bits off and changing the height of the bars and the stem and changing all of that stuff, because really how easy it is to work on is the biggest test for an aero bike sometimes. And I think that will be a really interesting thing to see.
Do let us know what you think about the bike in the comment section below. Are you as excited as I am about it? Or how do you think it stacks up against the other releases this summer? And also, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Keep my eye out for snakes along this back wall. Is that one?